world. You know, my mom got very sick when I was very young. She died, but it left me with a lot of fear. Time I was about 11, I discovered alcohol and very rapidly moved to experimenting with drugs.
So from 11 to 21.
Yes, 11 to 21, the guy I was living with, he became very abusive and began beating me quite badly. It nearly killed me. It really did. And that's not an exaggeration. It really isn't. However, life happens, right? Life happens.
Addiction is a response to something that you're trying to avoid in your life. I mean, how does the world look like through the eyes of someone who's totally consumed?
Well, when I had substances in my system, the world was a great place.
What about that world that you wanted to be in?
I just didn't have a clue. I didn't understand that I had a problem. I didn't understand that I'm addicted to these things. I've been clean and sober now for over 33 years. It's being able to admit that I'm powerless over whatever it is that I'm powerless over, whatever it is, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, whatever it is, that my life has become unmanageable. So I spent the first 6 months of my recovery really learning how to go one day at a time without putting anything into my system. Any time that any one of us gets a period of 24 hours clean and sober, it's a miracle.
It's a miracle. Hey, Karianne, such a pleasure having you here. Finally, you are here. You could not escape.
Thank you very much, JRV. Thank you very much for asking me to be here. It's a real honor. It's a real honor to be here.
Pleasure is all mine. And I know it. I can't wait to dig deeper into the life story of someone who has had so many experiences to share with the world.
Yeah, a lot of experiences, that's for sure.
Karianne, one of the questions that I ask people is if you can share one of those stories from your childhood that brings smile on your face today as well.
Okay, a story from my childhood that brings a smile to my face. Right. I would probably have to say that it would be the times that my grandfather spent with me. It was my mom's dad, and he would come and stay with us for quite a while. I mean, he would stay with us for, weeks at a time, sort of thing. It would be like maybe a month or 6 weeks or something like that he would stay. I loved my time with my grandpa. Like, I lived very close to the school that I went to, like the elementary school. So he would walk me to school. And I remember like holding my grandpa's hand, and we would go to the mall together and stuff like that. And it was always a real joy to be around my grandpa. He was very, very much a part of my childhood. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what about that still stayed with you after so many years?
Just the love that I felt for him, and it was completely reciprocated. It was unconditional love, is what it was. Unconditional love. And just him being around. And I'm just picturing the way he looked and the way he walked. And he wasn't a very tall man, but of course I was like 5, 6 years old, so that didn't really matter. I mean, it just brings a smile to my face. Yeah. Yeah.
This is so interesting that every time when I ask people about those instances in their life that bring smile on their faces today as well, very often people talk about the love that they got from their parents, the love that they got, the care that they got from their grandparents, the time that they spent with their siblings, the time that they could play and be with their cousins. And as we grow in our lives, we tend to forget all those moments and we continue to chase things that don't really matter beyond a point.
Yeah.
Karianne, what was that instance in your life? Let's get a closer look at your childhood that you believe changed the trajectory of your life.
I can't really say that there was one particular incident because, I mean, I had a very good childhood. I come from a good family. My parents are amazing people. They really are. I love my parents so much. And they really did the absolute best that they could for me. I know about my mom's history and how she grew up and how my grandmother was like her mom. I know how she was, and she was not well mentally. She was not well mentally. And my mom did everything she could to make sure that my upbringing was different. Um, However, life happens, right? Life happens. And being a hypersensitive child, I took on board things that probably were not mine to take on. And what that led to was just kind of a continuous feeling of not being good enough, of feeling like I would never live up to expectations.
As a child, I'm not sure if I had that understanding whether I'm good enough or not. How did you pick up that I'm not good enough? What made you be with this belief that I'm not good enough?
It was more just a feeling, like just something that was inside of me. I mean, as a child, I didn't really recognize it as being fear, but
Mhm.
as an adult, I can look back on these incidences, like with adult eyes, and understand what it was that I was experiencing. And it was fear. I had so much fear around trying to do something and it just not being good enough, like not being good enough in my parents' eyes, not being good enough in my teacher's eyes. Um, like just not being able to live up. Yeah, live up to expectations.
How old were you then?
I mean, this goes way back. I would say probably 6, 7, 8 years old. Definitely that.
Really?
Yeah, if not even younger. If not
Uh-huh.
even younger. Yeah.
And how did that change your equation with your parents, if it did, or the world that you were living in, the life that you were leading?
I think what happened from a very early age is um, I started looking for things outside of me to help me change the way I was feeling. That started very, very young. I remember being 8 years old and, like stealing cookies, because
Mhm.
sugar was an addiction for me. And that would help me change the way that I felt. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, this is something that helps me to feel differently.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Well, it started very young, I think was the thing that I was doing. It was always seeking for something outside of me in order to change what I was feeling inside, That young, I didn't understand what the problem was. And like I said, life happened in my house the way it happens in every household. My mom got very sick when I was very young.
Mm.
She nearly died. And I know that my parents did the best that they could, but it left me with a lot of fear. It left its impression. I was sent off to a friend's place that I didn't really know them very well. I felt very awkward in that house. But like I said, this is life happening. This isn't something that my parents intentionally planned and thought, oh, okay, well, how is this going to screw up this kid? It wasn't anything like that. It was just life happening and me being hypersensitive. Yeah.
As you mentioned that you started stealing cookies because you had this addiction of sugar. Isn't that normal for children to go for cookies? Isn't it normal for children to love sugar? And when you are saying that you were looking for something outside of yourself, tell me more about that. What was happening inside you, if you might recall something?
Well, I think that everybody enjoys sugar because it does help us to change the way that we feel. What happens in the brain chemically with sugar, salt, and fat is very similar to a cocaine response
Sugar, salt, and
and fat. So the
wow.
combination of those three things. And I heard on the radio one time that in a laboratory they had determined, it was a study that they had done, researchers, and they found that lab rats would go for an Oreo cookie over crack cocaine and heroin every time. Every time. And I thought, that's unreal. If you're a parent, you would think nothing of giving your child an Oreo cookie, right? But you would never give your child heroin or crack cocaine. And I thought, wow, like that's something that really demonstrates how addictive these things can actually be.
I don't know if I've read it somewhere, if I've heard it somewhere. Addiction is a response to something that you're trying to avoid in your life. So there's
Mm,
something that you're trying to run away from, because of which you move towards addiction.
mm.
What is it that little Karianne was running away from that
How
led
I
to her addiction
how I felt. Yeah.
about
You know,
self?
about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. About myself. Yeah.
Mm.
So that was definitely what I was trying to get away from. That was definitely what I was trying to change. This idea, this feeling that I had.
And how long did it continue? And then what happened? How did you deal with this addiction? Did you have that awareness? Did somebody tell you that what you're
No,
doing is a kind of addiction? Or,
had no awareness whatsoever at the time. Absolutely none.
yeah, of course, you would not expect that from a 6-year-old
No.
child.
And as I got older as well, through school, I was bullied. Yeah, not as bad as some kids, but I was definitely bullied. I'm Italian, and I developed very early. I had hips and a small waist, and I was teased a lot, certainly in junior high, about being fat and being called thunder thighs and hippo hips and this kind of thing, and that left its impression on me as well. And probably around the time I was about 11, I discovered alcohol.
At
Discovered
an age of
alcohol.
11, you are saying?
Yeah.
At an age of 11.
11 years of age. Yeah.
Really?
Really, really.
I mean,
It was a band
how,
trip that we were on. It was
how,
we were on, and I had gotten some alcohol from the house, and this just magically changed everything. It I mean, this feeling of inadequacy went away. Um, and I mean, I was always like the kid with like, the glasses and braces and unruly hair and this kind of thing. And this particular experience, I was away from home, and like I said, this feeling of uncomfortableness, it just vanished. And there was a boy involved. And so for the first time, I didn't feel ugly. It was a whole bunch. It was just sort of like a real combination of things. And I just thought, wow, this is what I've been looking for. Like this really works. This works a lot better than the cookies.
so what did you feel in that moment?
I felt normal. I felt normal. I felt like I could relate to people. Yeah. I didn't feel like a freak, I felt normal. That's the best way.
At an age of 11, finding alcohol and indulging yourself in that, somehow I'm not been able to figure out. Somehow I'm not been able to put the dots together.
Yeah. Yeah. This was through the 80s, and there was a lot of things that were going on in the 80s. There was a lot of peer pressure as well from the kids at school. A lot of kids my age, they were also doing the same kinds of things. A lot of kids weren't, by the way, but a lot of kids were. And those were the kids that I was attracted to. Those were the kids that I wanted to be around because they seemed to be fearless in taking risks, and that was something that I wanted. That was something I definitely wanted. I wanted to have that sense of fearlessness, you know?
So that's what you were searching for yourself. That's what you were seeking for. Because at one point in time, you are being bullied.
Mhm.
There's a sense of shame around.
Around my body, the way I look. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What I understand is you are sober for several years.
Yes.
So tell
Yeah.
me what happened.
My drinking slash using career, it only lasted about 10 years, but it was long enough that it nearly killed me. It nearly killed me. It really did. And that's not an exaggeration. It really isn't. I've been clean and sober now for over 33 years.
Hmm. And you said you indulged in alcohol for 10 years. So from 11 to 21.
Yes, 11 to 21. It
Mm.
started off with alcohol and very rapidly moved to experimenting with drugs, just
Wow.
like a bit of pot at the beginning, and then dropping acid and, doing some mushrooms, and it progressed from there and
It progressed from there, you said.
progressed
So
from there.
that
Yeah.
was the starting point when you're talking about drugs and mushrooms, and of
Yeah.
course, some acid. It
Mhm.
progressed from there. Just take me to the world. Take me to that world. What happens when you are in this world of alcohol, mushrooms? How does the world look like through the eyes of someone who's totally consumed?
Well, when I had substances in my system, the world was a great place. It was a great place. It was when the substances were no longer there that I struggled.
What was the struggle?
How to get more. Because that world that I had accessed through substances, through alcohol, through drugs, was a world that I really enjoyed being in.
What about that world that you wanted to be in?
It was like there was a buffer around me. I had protection. And then without alcohol, without drugs, it was like that was stripped away and I was left bare. That's how it felt.
And that happened with you when you were 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You were still a teenager.
And I didn't know I had a problem. I didn't realize that there was a problem, because like I said, I sought to be around kids who were also using and experimenting with substances. So I didn't
Mm.
realize that there was a problem. By the time I was 15, I'd moved out of my parents' home and I was living with a guy who was a drug dealer. And that was a very interesting time as well.
Now I'm a little confused because the choice of the words that you have.
Hmm.
You said I was in alcohol, I was in mushrooms,
Hmm.
I was in different substance, and from there I progressed.
Yes.
And then you mentioned you were staying with a drug dealer, and that time was interesting. Tell me what you mean by interesting, because the world that you lived in and the world that I live in, I think they are two different worlds. Would love to hear what happened in your world when you are saying it was an interesting space that you were in.
Yeah. There was a lot of intoxication, and that was on a daily basis. I was drinking daily, and that was definitely from the age of 15 onwards. I drank daily, and I was smoking a lot as well. I mean, the drugs that he was dealing, it was mainly like pot and hash and this kind of thing. So it wasn't really hard drugs that I was experimenting with at that point, and there was a lot of alcohol, a lot of alcohol. And this was every day, every day, every day, every day. It was kind of fun at first. It was like an adventure, not something I hadn't done before. Being 15 and in this environment, I felt cool. I felt grown up. I felt, yeah. And I just didn't have a clue, really. I just didn't have a clue.
Where you were heading towards, what are you
Exactly.
creating, where you living in?
And the relationship became quite violent, became very abusive. The guy I was living with, he became very abusive. Yeah.
And then how did you get out of that?
I left him one night. It was the night before Christmas Eve, and I had just turned 17, and we'd gotten into this huge argument. I mean, I can't say it was an argument. He just got really violent and began beating me quite badly. I remember him with his knees on my shoulders and his fist going into my face. At that time, I probably weighed about, I don't know, maybe 52 kilos, maybe. And he probably weighed about 150. Yeah. He was he wasn't very tall. I mean, we were close to the same height, but he was a very big man. He was a very big man, um, and very powerful, very strong. And that night, I don't know how I managed to leave, but I did. I managed to get out of that house. I managed to get out of that situation. And I went back to my parents. They took me to the hospital, and the hospital x-rayed my face because it'd been quite obvious that I'd been beaten up. And the hospital calls the police because then there's no onus on the victim, so the police were called. And the hospital had said that I was very lucky to get away when I did because he had cracked all the bones in my face. And that if I had continued to be hit that way, then there probably would have been permanent damage. I think it was the next day, we went with the police back to that house and we got my things. And
And when you're saying we means what?
me and my
You
parents.
and your parent.
I can't remember if my mom was with me. I know my dad was definitely with me. And I was terrified. I was hiding under the dashboard, and the cops came to the car, and I wouldn't sit up in the seat. I was down in the dashboard because I was so afraid that he would see me. The guy that I'd been living with, I was so afraid he would see me.
And was that the end of the relationship, the abusive relationship that you were a part of? Or was that the end of an era in your life?
I continued to be in that space for a while afterwards. Not quite in the same way. I was still using and I was still drinking. And again, completely oblivious to the fact that I had a problem.
Hmm.
Just, I didn't know I had
It's
a
normal
problem.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it was normal. And I didn't understand that I had a problem. I didn't understand that I was addicted to these things. I didn't understand
Hmm.
that. And even if somebody had tried to explain it to me, I wouldn't have listened to them, because I mean, I was 17. I mean, I knew everything, what could you tell me that I could possibly learn from? There was no willingness to even look at anything like that. And in addiction to substances like drugs and alcohol, I also had quite a severe eating disorder as well, like a really severe eating disorder, sort of oscillating back and forth between anorexia and bulimia. When the bulimia was really bad, I was probably binging and purging up to 30 times a day, which is a lot. That's a lot,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So possibly, Karianne, what I'm listening is that everything that could go wrong was going in that direction for you.
Yeah, kind of was.
So
Kind of.
what was that moment when you chose to get out of that?
I continued sort of along the path that I was on for several years, up until, like I said, I was 21. And
Wow.
by that point, I was living with another guy who was also a drug dealer. And it was also kind of a violent relationship. It was a violent relationship on both sides. Like I would attack him physically as well. I mean, I'd thrown ashtrays at him, pots of boiling water. And the people we were associating with at that time used to say, "Stay away from Carrie because she's crazy." And I used to really like that. I used to really like that. I enjoyed it that that's the way people thought about me.
And why is that?
Well, going from a girl who was bullied in school to being somebody that people were wanting to stay away from, it felt powerful. It felt powerful.
Okay. And then?
So I was doing a lot of drugs at that time, a lot of drugs. And at one point, the people that I was hanging around had said to me, you might want to do something about your problem. And I actually thought that was really quite cheeky because
There's no problem.
just as much as I was, like,
Yeah.
they were doing the same things that I was doing, but suddenly I'm the one with the problem. How does that work, right? And so I'd been in and out of detoxes, and I'd been in and out of rehabs and this kind of thing. And I'd gone to the detox again after a particularly hard weekend. I'd been using a lot of drugs, and I remember during the intake, the guy was talking to me about programs and treatment. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I'm here because I want a vacation. And that was the exact word that I used. I wanted a vacation.
So going to a rehab means going for a vacation.
Going to detox was a vacation for me. Yeah. And it's really interesting because even as I said that, like it was just par for the course. Like there was no red flags that went up for me, and I've come since to realize that people do things like, they go to the Grand Canyon for a vacation, or they go to Euro Disney, or they go to Thailand or something. Like this is what they do for vacation. They don't necessarily go to detox. So I was there, and I was there for 8 days, and no, 10 days. I was there for 10 days that time. And when I left, the first thing I did is I picked up again. But something had changed. Something had really changed. And I had wanted to leave the relationship that I was in, and he did not want me to leave. And we were having a discussion about this. And again, he had his knees on my shoulders and he was putting his fist in my face. And I will always remember this so clearly, being in that position. And suddenly it was like I heard a thunderclap, like a boom. It was like a sonic boom. I could have sworn that the windows were vibrating. It was that powerful. And it was what is called a moment of clarity. And that was my moment of clarity, where I understood that if my life was not something that I wanted, that was my responsibility. And that if I wanted to change my life, then I had to take the action in order for my life to change. I couldn't rely on, my dad to bail me out, or my mom to talk my way out of this, and I couldn't rely on some man to try and fix me either. It's like I needed to take responsibility. I needed to be able to respond to this situation. And that was the beginning of my recovery. I didn't necessarily stay clean from that point on, but it was the beginning of my.
So when you're saying that was the moment of clarity,
Mm,
did you do something to invite that?
no,
Uh, did you go
no,
through
that was.
something to invite that, or how did that happen? If I'm going through substance abuse in my life, or if things are not moving in the right direction for me, that people can notice it and I have a blind spot around that, I can't wait for that moment of clarity, right? Um, how would you define that moment for yourself? That why did that happen? How
I
did
believe
that
it
happen?
was divinely inspired. I believe it was divinely inspired.
Mm,
I believe that, I mean, whatever it is that your belief is, and I'm not here to define that for you, I'm talking about my belief. And I believe that we live in a world in which there are forces that we don't really understand.
mm.
And I believe that that moment was from this force, from angels, from God, from the divine, from the universe. It was a message that said, it's time for you to get your shit together, kid.
Wow. Wow.
Because I was dying, and I knew that. I knew that I was dying. I knew that I was not going to live much longer. And the way I was going, I was either going to overdose or else I was going to end up, you know, in a dumpster somewhere. And that was the way I was going. Um,
And you mentioned that for the last 33 years, you have been sober.
yeah, yes, clean and
Wow.
sober. Yeah.
And please take me through that journey.
Ooh.
I mean, would love to hear the transition, the challenges. How did you manage to walk on that path every single day? Because at one point in time, somebody who believes it's a vacation to somebody who can claim that, you know what, I've been clean and sober for last 33 years. It's a huge claim to make, Karianne.
Yeah. It's I'm so grateful. What happened was I went back to the detox that I'd been in for vacation. And this time when they were talking to me about programs and about treatment, I was listening to what they had to say. And I was like, okay, so how do I do this? And so from the detox center, I went to a treatment center. And from a treatment center, I went to an all women's halfway house. And then I went into another treatment center and then back to the halfway house. So I spent the first 6 months of my recovery really learning how to go one day at a time without putting anything into my system. And I'm so grateful that those institutions were available to me because they provided a safe space for me. They provided a space in which other people were working towards the same thing, which was recovery, right? That's what we were working towards. And all of them were based on the 12 steps. And for me, that's what saved my life was the 12-step fellowships. You know,
Mm, mm.
it was a mutual aid 12-step fellowship program that I entered into.
You said 12 steps fellowship program.
Yes. Yeah.
When you are saying that it saved you, what does that mean? Tell me about the 12 steps fellowship program. What is that? And how did that help you to deal with the addiction that you were dealing with? Addiction of not only alcohol, but substance abuse as well.
Mm. Yes, it was substance abuse, and there was also food in there as well. So a 12-step fellowship is basically a society of men and women who come together to help each other with their problems, right? This is basically what it is. We are not affiliated to anything or anyone. So we are completely independent. We are financially independent as well. We are completely self-supporting. We do not accept outside contributions. And what that does is it frees us up to really work on our primary purpose, which is to help other people, for us to stay clean and sober and to help other people. This is our primary purpose, right? And the 12 steps is basically a way of me being able to look at my life and to be able to reclaim the responsibility for my life.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And to clear the wreckage of the past, to be able to try and clear up all of the stuff that was there, and not just the stuff from when I was drinking and using drugs, but also the stuff from beforehand as well, because there was a reason that I picked up drink in the first place. So what the 12 steps helped me to do was to be able to really take a look at these things, and to change them, to make a change.
So I understand that 12 steps is when you look at what's happening, then you make a sincere attempt to bring shift in your life. You look at the past, you look at from where it all began for you. So if you
Mhm.
can just take me through those 12 steps, that could help me to deal with any kind of addiction that I might be dealing with. It could be the addiction for food, for alcohol, for
Mhm.
lying, for
Mhm.
substance abuse. It could be addiction to porn.
Mhm. Or to sex, or to work, or to shopping, or I mean, anything. It could be anything. The first step is being able to admit that you have a problem.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's being able to admit that I'm powerless over whatever it is that I'm powerless over. And that because of my powerlessness over this particular whatever it is, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, whatever it is, that my life has become unmanageable, right? So there's two parts to the first step. There's the part about things being powerless, and then the unmanageability, right?
Hmm.
That's the first step. And then the second step is coming to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity, right? And Albert Einstein, he defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Yeah. You said second step that you're talking about is that there's a power beyond me
Yes,
that has the power to take care of me.
yes.
Hmm. Okay.
And I had a really good introduction to that power when I had that moment of clarity.
I'm sure.
It was very clear to me that there was something well beyond me and much bigger than me that had my best interests at heart.
And how did you recognize that? This is the voice of a power which is beyond me. And you
Because I,
mentioned is that was a divine moment for you.
because I'd never thought that before. That was not something that had ever entered into my thinking before, because
Wow.
I always thought that I'm entitled to this, and why should I accept responsibility, and no, people should look after me. And it was my whole way of thinking was completely different prior to that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
can I get from other people? And suddenly it was like, wow, I need to take action.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
responsible. Yeah.
So these are the two steps. And then what happens?
And then there's step 3, which is making a decision to turn my will and my life over to this power, as I understand this power to be. So the 12 steps is very much a program of action. It's not like sitting back on a therapist's sofa talking about things.
Yeah.
It's actually doing things and making a commitment and taking a leap of faith. 12-step programs are based on spiritual principles. It's not a religious program in any way, shape, or form.
Mm.
And what I love about 12-step programs is that it talks about a God of my understanding, how I understand this power to be, how I understand this force in my life to be. So it's my concept. It's nobody else's. It's how I see it, how I feel it, how I experience it.
Yeah, yeah. Karen, I'm just wondering, on one hand, I understand that, at least at the cognitive level, I can understand that you were going through those 7 steps when you said that I need to admit, right, to myself that I need to accept that there's something that I have to deal with. Enough is enough, and there's a power which is beyond me that will take care of me, and I just need to start walking on that path. You mentioned action, action, and action. During that path, Karianne, what is it that you were dealing with? How did you manage to deal with your parents? I'm sure they must be really disturbed. How did you manage to deal with the society that you were a part of? Also, how did you manage to deal with people that you left? Because those people that you met when you were possessed
Mhm.
with that addiction, right? They were still there.
Dealing with them was the easiest thing because I just stopped talking to them. I literally just cut them out of my life. Dealing with my parents has been a journey. And that has been a journey of, uh, it's been a living amends. The way that I tell my parents how much I love them and, the fact that I regret that period of my life is by staying clean and sober. It's by changing. It's by being a good daughter. It's by showing up when they need me to show up. This is how I deal with my parents today, by being there, especially when they need me to be there.
And Karianne, I'm somehow, as I'm talking to you, it appears as if I'm watching a movie, right? First, I'm not being able to understand how could an 11-year-old girl can get into alcohol.
Mm.
And then it did not stop there. Drugs, it did not stop there as well. Drug agents, it did not stop there as well. Rehabs, and then finding a way to get out of that.
Mm.
So this is the process. If I look at this part of your life, it's like self-destruction to finding a way for yourself. And today, you are a yoga teacher, you are a meditation teacher, you do a lot of work in the space of therapy, helping leaders all over the world to find their true self. What was that moment in your life when you declared that I would like to dedicate my life in service of others?
That was definitely when I came into 12-step fellowships because a large part of what we do, because how do I explain this? When I first started to come to meetings and there were people there who were there to help me, I can never pay back what was
Mm.
given to me. It was freely given to me. I can never pay that back, ever. But what I do is I pay it forward. So what that means is I show up at the meetings. I help keep the doors open. And if there's somebody who needs help, then I am responsible and I extend my hand. This is what it means. When I was in this all women's treatment center, I met a woman there and she was amazing. And she had been clean for like 5 years. I couldn't comprehend that. I mean, I had like 30 days or something. I just couldn't imagine somebody even wanting to stay clean for 5 years, let alone actually doing it. And she was taking the night shifts at this particular halfway house because her only son had been murdered in a drug-related incident. He'd been murdered, and she couldn't sleep because of the grief. And so she was taking the night shifts at this all women's recovery house because she was doing what she'd been taught to do, which was when the pain gets that bad, you help people who are new. When the pain gets that bad, you help somebody else. And that helps to take you out of your own grief, your own misery. And so I would definitely say that a life of service started upon entering 12-step fellowships. I love that woman so much. I really did. And she used to say to me, Karianne, I'm going to love you until you can love yourself. And when I'm helping new women, this is what I say to them. And it's true. It's true. I will love them until they can learn to love themselves. This journey has not been easy.
I'm
You
sure,
know,
Karianne.
I've struggled with a lot of things. You know, at the beginning, I really struggled with a lot of craving. I really wanted to pick up drugs again. I didn't. And for me, that's a testament of how powerful this thing actually is, because I didn't have to pick up. I desperately wanted to, but I didn't have to pick up. And that shows me how powerful this thing actually is. I struggled with that. I struggled with nightmares. I had horrific nightmares for about 2 years when I first got clean. And because of the nightmares, I wasn't sleeping. So I was dealing with insomnia as well.
As well.
As well. It was very difficult, you know, and even sort of like through my recovery, you know, I've dealt with extreme grief, and I've dealt with you know, questioning my faith in this higher power. I've dealt with autoimmune illnesses, and over a decade with really bad insomnia. Couple that with the autoimmune. So I mean, I've dealt with a lot of things. And it's like I began a new journey when I started my yoga teacher training. I remember my yoga teacher saying to me, Karianne, I can teach you how to live a healthier, happier life. Sign me up for that one, please.
Mm.
Sign me up for that. And if there's anything that I can do to pass on my experience, strength, and hope to somebody else, then that's an honor.
Karianne, do you remember when you mentioned that at an age of 11, first time when you found alcohol and there was a guy involved as well? And in that moment, you felt that you've never felt before. There was a sense of completion. Did you find that feeling again for yourself without alcohol, without
Yes,
those guys around you?
yes, yes.
Hmm.
It's so much more than just a sense of completion. It's like a sense of ultimate belonging and
Hmm.
love and compassion. It's a very intense feeling, very intense. And it's coupled with gratitude beyond anything I've ever experienced.
So you did not only let go of that addiction for alcohol and drugs, you said no to any kind of addiction in your life. Is my understanding right?
I've dealt with things. I've dealt with my food addiction. I've dealt with the drugs and alcohol addiction. And then when there's other behaviors that come up, I have the tools to be able to look at them and to be able to discern exactly what's going on.
How did you develop that to discern what's going on and make the right choice for yourself that is healthy for your body, for your emotional health, for your mental well being, for your
Mm.
spiritual self?
That comes with something that we call intuition. And what is intuition? It's your inner teacher. It's that voice that's always there. And I believe that my intuition, my inner teacher, is very strongly connected to this power that wants the best for me. And being able to listen to that intuition and to be able to really get that feeling inside of me as to, okay, the path that I'm on right now, this doesn't feel right. So something needs to change.
Having dealt with everything that you've dealt with, Karianne, how did it change your life as the person that you meet in the morning in the mirror? What shift do you notice now that you did not even know between the age of 11 to 21?
The person that they're introduced to, like the person that they see, is who I am. This is me. And there's no need for me to wear a mask any longer. There's no need for me to try and be somebody else, because this is what I desperately wanted. I wanted to come from a different family. I wanted to live in a different city. I wanted to go to a different school, but most of all, I wanted to be somebody else. I
Did
wanted
you
to
find
be.
that?
No, I found myself.
Yeah.
And I've learned how to love her. I've learned how to love myself. And I can honestly say that today. And for a long time I couldn't. I couldn't do this. Oh, well, just look in the mirror and say that you love yourself. It was like, eh.
Doesn't
not
work
going
that way. Is yeah.
not going to happen. But I can honestly say, that I do. I love myself today, and that I treat myself with compassion.
And it took you just 33 years.
That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. And today when I meet people, they would tell me that I've been trying to bring some shift in myself for the last 7 days. It's not happening. Somebody will tell me I've been trying to bring this change in my life for the last 2 weeks. It's not happening. The next time when they tell me, I will ask them to listen to this conversation. It just took you 33 years.
That's all. And it did. It went by like that. When I look back on this idea of, being clean and sober for 33 years, and I remember talking to a really good friend of mine. We met when we were very, very early in recovery. I think we both had around 30 days or 60 days or something like that. She had 30 and I had 90 or something like that. And I remember speaking to her not that long ago, just after my birthday, my 33rd birthday, as a matter of fact. And I said to her, I just don't understand how this has happened. And she said, well, you didn't die and you didn't pick up.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I think
Yeah.
that itself is a victory, isn't it?
I think that's an amazing victory. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we're told is that we're miracles, because the most natural state for somebody who's dependent on drugs and alcohol to be in is to be loaded. It's to be under the influence of drugs and alcohol. That's the most natural state. So anytime that any one of us gets a period of 24 hours clean and sober, it's a miracle.
It's a miracle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Karianne, thank you so much for taking us through this roller coaster ride that you took. I'm sure it was not easy, but I can definitely look into your eyes and tell you that you are a miracle. You are an inspiration. And all my conversations with you have left me inspired, have left me in a space where I can love myself and be totally humbled and grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.